Thank you very much, Lori. We're going to be talking about housing options. I'm an attorney. None of my practice has to do with housing options. And that's because you can't make money. You can't make money doing this stuff, but it's an interest that I've had for a long time. I've been the chair of the real estate and housing section of the outlaw section of the state bar for God knows how many years, because no one else really wants the job. But in my judgment, the reason I've done it and the reason I've written about it is because I think that's where the real action is going to be. If I think 20 years from now, the nature of the elder care practice is going to be heavily about housing options. The COVID situation has brought to a head a lot of the issues that we've been talking about for years. Primarily been reading about nursing homes, but it doesn't just apply to nursing homes, it applies to other facilities too. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of new development. There's a lot of new ideas being discussed. And I think over the next few years, you're going to see a huge differential in some of the senior housing options available. What I'd like to cover in this short period of time is I'm going to start with the affordable housing options as they are that I know about in Westchester County. Then we're going to be talking about staying home. What are some of the techniques for staying home, some of the physical techniques? What do you have to do in your house to be able to stay home? We're going to go through a series of what I consider some of the issues for that. And then I'm going to talk about some of the financial issues. How do I afford to stay home? Some people can easily, some people can't. So we're going to talk about what some of the options are there. And then we're going to just briefly talk about the naturally occurring retirement communities for those people that may be in apartment buildings. I'd like to briefly mention a concept that's excited me for a number of years, which is available in Mamaroneck, by the way. It's called the village concept, the village to village concept. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'll be reviewing what that's about, how it got started, and why I think it's such a wonderful idea. We're going to be talking about what happens if you need custodial medical care in your house. How do you arrange for that? How do you pay for that? What are some of the options available to you? We're going to be talking about independent living and assisted living, as those options are available, what some of the pluses and some of the minuses are of those options. And I will certainly be happy to take questions afterwards, or if there are things that you would like me to cover that I haven't necessarily covered, if you could put it in the chat box, and perhaps Lori will be able to provide me with the information as to what it's going to be. Let's first talk about the affordable housing options. Westchester County has not been great, frankly, in terms of what the affordable housing options are. You've probably heard about the Section 8 voucher programs. It's an income-based program where if you apply and you accept it, you get a voucher, which guarantees that if your landlord accepts and provides for that kind of housing, that your rent would not exceed 30% of your gross income. There have not been historically in Westchester, unfortunately, a lot of options available. I see that changing rather dramatically now, by the way. I see this development. White Plains has got tremendous amount of development now. And my firm is involved in a lot of the development, and I can tell you that they all have affordable housing issues. So the Section 8 vouchers hopefully will become a more available program. You have to sign up in advance. If you're even thinking about it, you should be signing up now. Even if it may take several years for you to get into and get one of those vouchers and find a facility that would accept the vouchers. There are other affordable housing arrangements. Again, Westchester had not been great, but I think with Latimer administration, I see a big difference. And I do think that there'll be a lot more available in that regard. I don't have a whole lot more to say about the affordable housing options, but just information that I have, mostly because I'm on the board of WJCS, that I even hear about these things. Staying at home. Most people that I've spoken to in the elder care counseling that I've done, I want to stay home. No one puts their hand up and say, I can't wait to go to a nursing home. That doesn't happen. And it's frankly quite rare that people say, I want to go to an assisted living facility or even an independent living facility. Most people are comfortable in their house and they want to stay home. There are challenges to that, challenges that become more evident as you grow older. There are physical limitations that we have. So there are some of the things that I've taken for granted that I don't consider, but as I age out, are going to be significant issues, physical issues. For example, what are some of the common hazards that you see in someone's house? It's going to sound ridiculously simple, but it's important. Rugs on the ground, it's very easy to trip. Not wall-to-wall rugs are okay, but the throw rugs, the carpets can be a significant problem. So you're going to want to remove those to make it easier for your house. Lighting is a significant issue. Our eyesight is not always, diminishes over time, so we have to increase lighting to make life easier. Kitchens are a potentially very, very difficult area and a challenging area. But there are options available for that, certainly. And you can get utensils that are easy to manage. You can get can openers that have large grips. You can get, if you go to any of these stores now, you'll see there's a whole area of things that are designed, implements that are designed to make it easier to manipulate kitchen items. In the bathroom is another challenging area. So not only do you have to worry about the size of the door, and if you're wheelchair bound, you have to make the entryway to the bathroom wheelchair, but you have to worry about things like slipping in a bathtub. So having things like grab bars, not something that you would want ordinarily, but as we age out, that's something that would enable us to remain home easier. Going from floor to floor is a challenge, and some of these houses that I know, single hall colonials and the like, end up having fairly significant stairs. So you might want to be thinking about either moving your living quarters to the main floor, or putting in one of the electric stairs, which you can rent. The entry to the house, I mean, if you're in an apartment building, obviously it isn't an issue because there's always access to it. But if you're in a private home, as many of us are, you have to make sure that there's easy access, that there are ramps if you're in a wheelchair, that the steps are not terribly steep, that there's grab bars, that there's wrought iron rails or other things to make it easier. You've heard about the personal alert systems. I mean, a lot of people stay home. Most of the time there's someone else living there, but that's not always true. And so having these personal alert buttons are a lifesaver in many senses. And something that's become much, much more prominent, particularly with COVID, is telemedicine. That you're able to communicate with your doctors. If you're, God forbid, if you're hospitalized, and you can communicate with your doctors, they can keep tabs on the medicines that you're taking. You can be interviewed. They can watch your development, and that's been very helpful in eliminating revisits to the hospital for the same injury. So telemedicine is made a huge difference. So those are some of the physical issues. I'm probably just touching upon some of the very basic stuff. The cost of staying home, just because you become retired doesn't mean that your real estate taxes go down. The cost of the gardener remains the same. Obviously, if you're in an apartment, it's a different set of issues. You have rental, but there's still food items, there's, your phone, your Con Ed bills, and the like. So some people can have the wherewithal to afford it. A lot of people don't have the wherewithal to afford it. So what are some of the options to remaining home? Frankly, the biggest, if you have a house or if you have a condominium, you can do this too, are reverse mortgages. Am I a big fan of reverse mortgages? No. But when they become the only game in town, it's something to absolutely to consider. Ordinarily, when you take a mortgage out, I'm sure you all know, you sign a note and you have to make monthly payments and so on. A reverse mortgage is not that. You make no payments. The bank actually looks at the equity in your house, so you need equity in your house, and will make a determination as to how much they can possibly loan. There are different forms of reverse mortgages. You can get a lump sum. So if you need repairs on the house, you can get a lump sum. You can get monthly stipend. And so you may end up, if your Social Security and pension perhaps are not sufficient to be able to stay home comfortably, then you can use a reverse mortgage to get a monthly sum. Or you can get a combination of the two, where you may get a lump sum up front and the monthly stipend, which will enable you to remain home more comfortably. The conditions of it are that when you leave the house has, they want to get paid, and that's what it's all about as far as the banks are concerned. They provide a valuable service by allowing reverse mortgages, but there are some hidden issues, and the hidden issues, if I've been to reverse mortgage closings and I've seen that you don't write a check at a reverse mortgage closing. So you're not aware of what's really going on. There are brokerage commissions. The bank has points sometimes. There are legal fees, there are insurance fees, and you don't see it, you don't feel it, but they're there. And they're added to the amount of the money. So if you think you're borrowing $100,000 up front, 25 of that's gone. So it's the hidden stuff, which is exactly why under New York law, in order to qualify and to receive a reverse mortgage, you have to go to school. You have to get educated. In Westchester, we have a wonderful group called Westchester Residential Opportunities. And they have been the education source for people getting reverse mortgages for God knows how many years now. You will not be, so if you want a reverse mortgage, you will be counseled. You have to be counseled for it. So you understand what some of these hidden issues are. Again, that's not something that I would consider for a first option for any number of reasons. But frankly, if it's the only game in town and it's the best way for you to stay home, I would very much consider that. It will eat up the equity in your house. There's no two ways about it. Before you know it, the equity will be significant, and it's compounded monthly and so on. So it will reduce the value of what's left for anyone else if you care about that. But again, for the sense of your personal dignity and the dignity of the senior that wants to remain home, it may be a valuable opportunity. There's another concept that I have found absolutely fascinating over the years, and they exist in Westchester County. The concept of a naturally occurring retirement community. It's you might hear the term NORC. The primordial NORC was Penn South, which is on 7th Avenue and 17th Street in Manhattan. Originally, there were 10 very large, or 10 or 12 very large apartment buildings. And those were the buildings that housed the members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. I remember, many of you may remember, if when I was a kid, there were lots of TV commercials, look for the union label, and Those were all the members of the ILGWU, and many of them lived in Penn South. It was not designed as a senior residence. It was not intended as a senior residence, but it became a naturally occurring retirement community. People aged out and they didn't move. So the beauty of it is that we learned that the government, New York City learned over time that they could provide services for a larger number of people if they organized it properly. So the building started having different services available, whether it be transportation services available, whether it be meeting rooms. They would bring doctors in. So all these things that you ordinarily wouldn't get, and the city would have to provide for many, were done on a large scale. It saved money for everyone, and it certainly saved money for the city, and it provided wonderful services, and it provided socialization for the people that are living there. The buildings still exist. The buildings are still NORCs. But there are many NORCs available. I live in the White Plains area, and I can assure you there are several NORCs available. I mentioned before that I was on the board of WJCS. WJCS is heavily involved in managing NORCs in Yonkers, providing social services. Those are the things that can be brought in when you have a NORC. So these are things that you should be thinking about. And I believe if you go on the Westchester County Senior website, you will be able to see a list of senior housing, which would include some of the NORCs that are available. The beauty of that is the public-private partnership. We talk about what's going to be the solution to all the people that are going to be seniors now. What's the, how are we going to house them? How are we going to take care of them? There are people that think it's private development. There are people that are going to think it's going to be government that has to provide it. And my opinion is a combination of public and private partnerships is a wonderful thing. It allows you to magnify the cash that you are able to develop and bring in all these different government services. So I would consider, whether it's a NORC or something else, the idea of a public-private partnership is something that you should be aware of and be taking advantage of. And frankly, over the years, I think, as I mentioned, over the next 15, 20 years, I think you're going to see a whole lot more of development, and I think a lot of it is going to be in the form of public-private development. Another development for staying home is, you might have heard of the village concept. Before I started studying this, I'd never heard about it. In Beacon Hill in Boston, there was an area of these buildings, these apartments surrounding the Beacon Hill area, which is a relatively wealthy area. They came up with the idea, which was the genesis of what we now know as the Village Network, where people that needed certain services were able to get those services for providing a relatively modest fee. The villages are a membership grassroots nonprofit organization run by volunteers and run by staff. They coordinate affordable services. They vet people that provide services. They provide transportation where necessary. They provide health and wellness programs. Again, they offer, if there are contractors that want to get, they vet contractors, they vet accountants, they vet lawyers, so that you get a list of people that are reputable in the community. So it's a community-driven organization. It's run by people. I don't think the government has anything to do with this. It's taken off like wildfire, frankly, across the country, because it is such a good idea. And there are, last I looked, there were something like 200 villages. There is one in your area, in Mamaroneck. it's called At Home on the Sound. You can look it up. Many of you may have heard about it and so on. The villages provide all these services. It's sort of one-stop shopping. It allows people to age in place. At Home on the Sound, they provide transportation services. During COVID, they have imposed strict guidelines, COVID guidelines for protection, whereas ordinarily during non-COVID times, they would arrange trips to the city or trips, for shopping trips and so on. A lot of that they can't do now because of COVID. So they've adapted and they're able to do a lot of these programs virtually. They have always had a large socialization component. So the village concept is something that I would very much encourage you to think about or to make known. It works for people in apartment buildings. It also works for people in individual homes. It allows communities to work together, to develop together, and aging in place is the sole issue, and safe aging in place is the sole issue of these villages. Frankly, I find it an exciting concept, and again, I think it's one of these things that over the next 20 years we're going to see that idea expanding and expanding. So those are some of the issues about staying at home, physical issues, financial issues, but we haven't touched upon one of the most serious issues of all is what happens when you need custodial care, or you need heavy duty medical care. You don't want to go to a nursing home, and you want to be able to stay home, but you want to be able to stay home safely. Anyone that's been involved or seen or helped someone knows that the cost of remaining home can be, with assistance, can be quite high. I'm talking about home health aides, personal care aides. Usually, some people are able to stay home with just someone to come in and clean, but there usually gets a point where that doesn't work anymore. So we were into custodial care, and you probably all know that although this is a form of medical care, if you're taking care of someone, that their private insurance and your Medicare, even with the Medicare supplement, doesn't touch this. Privately, my experience in Westchester County is it's about $25 an hour for a personal care aide or a home health aide. And that would go up to 12 hours. If you're able to remain home and you need full-time care, usually there's a daily rate, and the daily rate is the equivalent of 13 hours. So if you can get someone who is a live-in, it's the equivalent cost of 13 hours. If you cannot use a live-in, and I'll explain what that means, but if you cannot use live-in, you're going to be paying on an hourly basis, on a 24-hour basis. So the cost goes up $400 or $500 a day fairly easily. The difference of people who can use a live-in and not use a live-in, it depends on, if you have 24-hour needs, you can't use a live-in. There are people that get up in the middle of the night. There are people who, as they age out, are up in the middle of the night. They don't know the difference between night and day. And so the aides are up 24 hours. They can't do that. So if you're a person that needs care and you can sleep through the night, then of course you can do with a live-in. Otherwise, you're going to be using a 24-hour care on an hourly basis. And I said before that the cost is very, very high. So it's either going to be private pay out of your pocket. Some of us that were able to, years ago, get long-term care insurance may be able to use long-term care insurance for the cost of the home health aides and the personal care aides. However, Most people didn't. That concept didn't catch on the way people had hoped it was going to catch on. So that brings us to public funding options. And there are public funding options. New York tends to have a very vibrant and probably pretty generous home care program under the Medicaid guidelines. Medicaid is a government program. It is a means-tested government program. And even though it's not the focus of this discussion, I thought it'd be worth just touching on because there may be questions about it. How do I use Medicaid to remain home? For Medicaid, there are income limitations and there are asset limitations. The asset limitations are $15,900 in assets. Those are not all assets count. There are assets that are deemed to be exempt items, exempt resources. For example, your home doesn't count as long as you live there or a spouse lives there or a disabled adult child lives there. It is not an available resource. For those that have IRAs or other qualified plans, as long as you put the qualified plan or the IRA into pay status, which you have to do after you become 70 and a half in New York State, in the United States, then that resource disappears. You can have several $100,000 in an IRA account, and when you're applying for Medicaid, if it's in pay status, they'll be aware of it, but it will not impact eligibility. The minimum distributions, however, will count towards income. The income limitations are also quite severe. When we talk about Medicaid home care, you're allowed $904 a month in 2021. Now, that's not a lot of money. That's certainly not enough money for people to live on in Westchester County. However, there are ways to get around that. I know it sounds peculiar, but many of you may have heard of these pooled income funds. A pooled income fund is a fund run by a not-for-profit entity. The sole purpose of these funds is for people to remain home and be able to have access to their income and receive Medicaid. There's no other use to these funds. There are actually many organizations around New York State that provide these services. So if you are allowed to keep $904 a month and your income is above that, well, if you don't use the pooled fund, the pooled trust, then your excess income has to be spent on the home health care before Medicaid pays the first dime, which leaves you with $904 a month to pay your rent, to pay other things like that. And of course, that isn't enough. When you use the pooled income trust, what happens is the excess income will go up, will be transferred on a monthly basis to the pooled trust. And then you or someone on your behalf with a power of attorney for probably will be able to direct the pooled trust what to pay on your behalf. So if there's a mortgage, if there's rent, if there's apartment maintenance, they will pay that. They will not pay someone else's costs, but they will pay your costs. The prohibition is that they will not pay anything that Medicaid pays for. And because that the money that goes to the pooled trust would otherwise be used to reduce the Medicaid burden for New York State, they are very, very New York State inspects them very, very strictly. They review the books of these organizations, and they're very, very strict. So they're very, very careful that the pool trust that I've been involved with, that I've seen, are very, very careful about what they will pay for and what they will not pay for. So you have to be careful. But I've also found it interesting that even though they will not pay for things Medicaid pays for, let's just say Medicaid pays for 12 hours a day. Well, that's all Medicaid pays for. If you think you need more than 12 hours a day, or you need 2 aides sometimes because one's not enough to lift you, to move you, I have found that the pool trust will pay for the extra aid or for the extra hours, because again, that's not something Medicaid pays for. So, I mean, that's a very, very valuable tool that allows people to remain home. Traditionally, New York State had allowed people to transfer their assets in order to make themselves Medicaid eligible, and it had no application to home care. Whereas in nursing home care, you probably have heard about the 5-year rule and lookbacks and the periods of ineligibility. That did not apply to Medicaid home care. That is until April of 2020. There was legislation in April of 2020 that changed that. So we have to be much more careful now. We can't just give assets away because there's going to be an issue with that. What has happened, though, is because of COVID, the regulations have not been issued by the Department of Social Services. There are many, many questions that have not been answered. So although the start date under the legislation was October 1, that has been moved. It was first moved to January 1. It was moved then to April 1, which is today. And it's now being moved to July 1. So although the legislation's there and we don't know how it's going to be, as of today, you can still, if you make an application today and file the application and you're eligible, you will be made eligible under the old rules, which means that that these gifts will not impact your eligibility. That will not remain true for much, much longer at all. There are many people that I've come across that say, I really would love to participate in this Medicaid program, but I don't want their aides. I don't want to use an agency. I've got someone that's been taking care of mom for God knows how long. Mom loves her, or dad loves her. What do I do? And the answer, there are two answers to that. And one answer is that the aide can work for an agency that is a Medicaid qualified agency, or alternatively, there's a whole different process that is called the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And that means that the aides are paid by Medicaid, but they don't work for an agency. You hire them. It's a wonderful program. It was originally designed because these agencies were not allowed did not allow their aides to perform certain services. Couldn't give medications, they couldn't do other things. But if you hire the aide, you can train them to do whatever you want. So if you want medications, you can train them for that. They can participate in the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. Medicaid pays them because they'll have to accept the Medicaid rate for it, but it is a wonderful opportunity. And it's the answer to the question of, what do I do because mom has these people that she's loved for a long time, is very comfortable with them, and I don't want to change that. So that's sort of the discussion about staying home. I want to mention assisted living and independent living. Assisted living, all over Westchester County, you can't take a step 10 feet in one direction without walking into an assisted living facility. I mean, that wasn't 20 years ago. That was totally untrue. There was nothing available. Now it's a whole different, it's a totally different ballgame. The concept of assisted living is, of course, that it's a facility, but it provides socialization. It provides basic services. It provides meals. It provides socialization. So for someone who's social, remaining home can be very restricted. And it's become much worse during COVID. But for people that like socialization, remaining home is not always the best option. And a lot of the assisted living facilities provide wonderful opportunities, and they're very, very well run. Some of them are very, very well run. The problem with the assisted living facilities is the cost. It is not unusual in Westchester County for the cost to be a base of about $6,000 a month. You will find also that there are add-ons to that. There are additional services that they will provide. There may also come a point where they'll say, well, we can't allow you to stay here because we can't take care of you. So we want you to hire an aide. And by the way, we provide the aid. You just got to pay extra for it. So it can easily get to the point where there's a $10,000 a month bill, sometimes more. So there is a high cost to assisted living. Now, so the obvious question is, does Medicaid pay for that? Does Medicaid provide assisted living? New York State has an assisted living program that provides a basic rate for people that participate in assisted living. And a lot of the facilities around New York State have beds reserved that participate in the assisted living program. Most of them have a very small number of beds. There are not that many in Westchester County. There's not that many beds available in Westchester County because land is so costly. But if you, interestingly enough, there's more in the 5 boroughs, and there's far more upstate that participate in the assisted living program. There is one facility that I've had experience with that it's called the Westchester Center for Independent Living. It's in Yonkers. All their beds are assisted living. It's not going to be the same as the Atria, and it's not going to be the same as the Kensington or the Bristol. It's not going to be as fancy as those places. But my experience has been that they provide good care, and the families that have been there are delighted to have the opportunity to put someone in assisted living and not end up in a nursing home and have a Medicaid funded opportunity like that. So there is assisted living available on a private pay basis. You know, we talked about that, and you can get assisted living for Medicaid through Medicaid. The other thing you can do that's possible is, even if you're private paying for the basic room rate at an assisted living facility, if the facility comes by and says you need additional care, you may be able, there are ways to use Medicaid to hire the aides to provide that additional level of care. So there are different things you can think about. There are different financial opportunities that could be available. So those are the issues that I wanted to discuss with you, and some of the opportunities that I've been wanting to discuss with you. If there were things that you would like a further explanation on, or you have questions or things that I didn't cover that you think you would like to hear something about, if I can help you, I would be happy to do so.